Welcome to Wisdom Journey, the podcast where we explore the path of building an online business from the ground up. Here, I share my wins, struggles, lessons, and experiments so you can learn, adapt, and grow alongside me. I also interview experts in their respective field. Whether you're just starting out or looking for new strategies to scale, this is your space to find inspiration and practical wisdom. I'm your host, Wisdom Okonkwo, and I'm excited to take you on this journey. Today on Wisdom Journey, I'm joined by Delphia Howze, CEO of the Howze Solutions and author of Including You, an inclusion strategist with over 20 years of leadership experience, helping organizations build cultures where people truly thrive. Welcome to the podcast,
Thank you so
Delphia.
much. So happy to be here. So happy to
Yeah,
be here.
wow, my pleasure. You've spent over 2 decades leading in HR and inclusion across multiple industries. When did the inclusion stop being just a professional responsibility and become something personal for you?
Oh my gosh, for me, it's always been something very, very personal. I grew up in an area that had people from different backgrounds, different socioeconomic standpoints. And so inclusion has always been important to me because the reality is I'm a person who doesn't like to be excluded.
Yeah.
So from the very beginning, I think of my what as far back as I can remember, it's always been important to me. When I got into the workforce, I recognized that a lot of times there was a lot of finger pointing of who should do it, how it should be done, and who should set the standard. But there was a point in my career where I realized that guess what? The responsibility and the accountability resides with the individual. So I was in the field of banking early in my career, and in the industry, not the field, the industry of banking. And I was in HR and recognized that we were having challenges in connecting with the community, which was an urban community, and we were having challenges there. And so, really taking a moment to step back and say, why was that? Right? It was impacting our numbers, it was impacting our branding, and that was a challenge. So, I that's where I got into the work of inclusion.
Wow. Was there a defining experience that shaped how you see the workplace culture today?
I think a defining experience was really the fact that, and I'll go back to that experience with within banking. That experience clearly demonstrated that we as a bank were not connecting with the individuals that we wanted to do business with. We weren't
Yeah.
connecting with them in terms of their needs, in terms of their interests, in terms of the culture. We were simply looking at that community as dollars and cents.
Wow.
And that, from the standpoint of, capitalism, probably, hey, that's what you should do. But no, you need to connect. And so what I did, I started barking up a couple of trees. And at the time, I wasn't in the space of inclusion. I was in HR, focused on that. And I was actually a branch leader. I was leading a lot of work at the bank. And went to the president and said, I can't figure it out. I'm looking at our numbers, I'm looking at our demographics, I'm looking at all of the data, and it's not making sense because ideally we should have been very successful in that area. All of the indicators said that that would be a reality for that location, but it wasn't. And finally, I said, well, I think there's a disconnect and who we're hiring, what we're training the people that we're hiring to do, and how to connect with the community, and the actual work that we're doing to create a more inclusive environment. And finally, he said, well, I don't think you're right, Delphia, but, if it's important to you, then go and figure it out and do something
Yeah.
about it. And I said, "Oh, okay. Now that's the worst thing that you can tell me to do is to go figure it out because that's exactly what I'm going to do." So I started the location's very first program to integrate and focus on inclusive efforts. At the time, it was called diversity training, diversity focus. But started that program and that's how I got into it. I recognized the deficit, was given the carte blanche opportunity to go and do something about it, and that's what I did.
Yeah. Wow. From your leadership experience, what actually happens inside organizations when inclusion is missing?
Oh, there's a huge loss. There's a huge deficit. So I'll take it from 2 standpoints.
Okay.
There's a loss from the employee standpoint because an employee doesn't feel that they can come and be their full self, right? You know, everybody wants to be successful. No one wants to come to work and fail, right? And
Yeah.
if I can't bring all that I have, all of the wonderfulness that I have, you have, you know, if people can't bring that to the table, then they're leaving a part of themselves, and that is a huge deficit. It's mental trauma. It causes mental trauma, and it doesn't feel good, right? So there's a deficit, lack of productivity, lack of motivation, lack of engagement, lack of connectivity that provides opportunities for collaboration within the organization. So those are all deficits that will happen from the personal perspective, from the employee perspective. Transition that to the organization, the other arm of the deficit, you're going to lose profits. You're going to lose money simply because people are going to start calling off. They're going to leave.
Yeah.
The cost of an employee leaving an organization is is astronomical, right? It's
Yeah.
more than their regular salary because you think of the time and money invested and all of the things aside from their salary. That's a huge loss, and potentially you lose it with regard to branding, the community, how people see you, your or the organization, and how they treat their employees and how they connect to the community. So it's a huge deficit when it's not there.
Can you share a story where culture, not strategy, determined whether a team succeeded or failed?
Yeah. Let's see, where culture was the winner, right? Not strategy. I'm gonna say off the top of my head, I think that culture and strategy go together. Now, I
Okay.
will say that, I know there's a mindset, I think it was Warren Buffett, culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? That is absolutely a reality.
uh,
I do believe that. But I think at some point the two have to convene and come together. So to answer your question high level, I think that culture always wins out because that sets the standards and the norms of the organization. And culture in alignment with the norms that are established, people will begin to either acquiesce to the culture or go against the culture. Okay. Strategy is saying the day to day, how are we operating? What's our end goal and how are we trying to get there? How are we meeting our mission? What are the procedural steps to get us
yeah.
to our mission? But with those procedural steps, you need to have the culture embedded in a way that people believe in the organization, people believe in themselves and the way that they contribute, and they feel valued for that. And that's going to help make sure that those steps actually happen. So I don't know that from my standpoint, I can't think of an example or an experience where where culture won over strategy efforts. I always see them in alignment. They're both necessary factors for ongoing success.
Oh, and I'm curious. Anybody can wake up and say, okay, I have a strategy for, let's say the marketing or how the business is going to move forward and do this. And so, yeah, this is the strategy. But culture is not, it's not one of those things you just wake up and say, you can have intention, but it has to be something that is, cultivated and people are trained and into a way of doing and being in the company.
Yes, I definitely agree with you there. And when you think of culture, I love what you said is the way people are trained and inculcated into the company, into the organization, right? It's really about not creating exclusion, right? Don't exclude people so that they can be a part of the culture, whatever that culture is, right? And it's not defined by the leaders, right? We like to say, oh, the leader defines the culture. There's an undergirding of what the
Yeah.
culture becomes and how it is defined in terms of how people see themselves and ultimately how they feel valued within the organization.
Yeah, I guess we could say culture is strategy. Many entrepreneurs when they hear topics like inclusion, um, you know, they're like, nah, those are for the big guys, the Fortune 500 companies. My goal is to focus on revenue, marketing, and growth. Why should someone building an online business or, or a small business care about inclusion early on?
Oh my gosh. Because you know what? If you're not focused on inclusion, then you're not focused on really building and growing, right? If you're operating from an exclusionary standpoint, in any organization, whether it's online operations, whether it's the largest organization in the world.
Yeah,
I'm not going to, but whatever that is, if you're not focused on, or if you do not understand the value, I'm not going to say if you're not focused on, if you don't understand the value of inclusion, then you're missing segments, you're missing markets, you're missing branding strategies, you're missing out on an entire um, opportunity to garner success. Exclusion, which is the opposite of inclusion, obviously, right? Exclusion really precipitates spaces where um, there's a singular focus, right? There's a singular level of comfort. Organizations that only focus on one dimension cannot be successful.
yeah,
It's impossible. And so, you may have organizations, it's interesting because, the work of inclusion is not hard to do. It just isn't, right?
yeah,
And people will say, well, I got to do so much more. I got to go to additional training. I got to hire a new. No, you don't. All you got to do is, I'm going to encourage people to think back to the very first time you ever felt excluded, right? Might be back in kindergarten, the first day in kindergarten, you didn't, maybe it was in high school, you didn't get picked for a team. Maybe it was in college, wherever it was. Every person has experienced some level of exclusion in their life, right?
yeah,
And I can guarantee you, I've had many conversations, I've done research, I've experienced it myself. It does not feel good. I've not met one person that said, you know what, I was excluded from something and it felt wonderful.
yeah. Wow.
Doesn't happen. It feels horrible.
Yeah,
And we don't want that in our workplaces, right? That deficit is real and it causes long-standing and long-term pain for the organization and the individual when inclusion is not present.
well, have you seen businesses unintentionally damage growth because they ignored the culture, especially in small and medium-sized business?
Unintentionally damaged? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do believe that I believe that most people always have good intent. I'm a person who operates through life to assume good intentions of individuals. And I think that most people have good intentions, right? In my soul of souls, believe that unintentional consequences come from people um, who think they're doing good, but really aren't. So yes, I do think that's a reality. Um, and the way to counteract that is, there has to be intentional realization that um, each person has personal accountability. There's a level of personal accountability, and it's not just, the organization has to figure it out or the CEO has to figure it out.
Yeah,
Every single person has a level of accountability.
uh,
And if I could just add one additional
please
piece,
do.
I think that it's important to recognize that, inclusion is really inclusion is proactive. It's not a reactive thing, right? So, you have to if every person went into their environments, into their workplaces with a mindset of being open and respectful and inclusive and bringing others along, right? Um, that's the proactive mindset to help move the needle in a positive direction, right? Instead of reacting to it, which a lot of companies and leaders and some individuals do, instead of reacting to the environment and saying, oh my goodness, well, now let me put together a program that says
Yeah.
that we're inclusive. You got to start it from the onset
Well,
and be intentional.
with the work you've done with inclusion, is it is it black and white? Is it like, so what I mean is, can we say if you're not included, you're excluded? If you're not excluded, you're included? Or is there like a middle gray line where you can be kind of included and kind of excluded? But we don't really know. Probably we could call that
Yeah.
exclude. I don't know what the name would be for that. But what's the
Yeah.
case?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would love to say that it is just absolute black and white. Either you are included or you are excluded, right?
Yeah,
It's they're bookends, right? Exclusion and inclusion are bookends um of a middle ground that says that there's intention, right? So if we had a Venn diagram, I would say inclusion and exclusion, and in the middle would be intention, right? So there has to be intention to move the needle with it's towards the positive direction. I don't think that it's an absolute fact that they are, absolute opposites of each other. I've been in situations, and I know of situations where good intentions, right, to create one type of environment, right, and the unintended consequence is that someone is excluded. So, for example, I'll think about resource groups. All right. If you've heard of employee resource groups, many of them, are focused on individual identity, right?
yeah,
Women resource groups, et cetera. The opportunity to recognize that, okay, if we're only having activities, programming, and focusing that only speak to that demographic group, potentially excluding a whole other group of people,
yeah,
right? Men, right? Now, here's where the intention comes in. That Venn diagram. Here's where the intention comes in. How do we open up the women's programming and the women's activities of that resource group to make sure that men can participate and understand the dynamics within that group as well, so that they
yeah,
can be welcomed into the environment and not feel as if they're set apart or siloed and can't participate in the activities. So I think um, when I think about it, and I think that's a fantastic question. So thanks for making me think about this. You
you're
know,
welcome.
um, exclusion, inclusion, and then in the middle, you have to have intention, or else you'll have those unintended consequences of absolute exclusion and deficit.
Yeah, I think now just listening to you explain and break that concept down, it occurred to me that inclusion and exclusion isn't it's not a dual. It's not like are you included or excluded. It's a question is to what degree are you included? Because we have businesses who they include the women and they try to cater for them and all that, but then the men they're excluded. Or we have businesses they include the men and the women, but one religious group they're not accommodated. They probably on Sundays, work on Sundays, but on a different day for that religion, there is work, right? And then there is so the question is, it becomes much, much, much more complex when you have a company that has people from all parts of the world with different kinds of cultures, different kinds of beliefs, different kinds of socioeconomic status and all that. And it's you make one rule and you realize that, oh wow, even though I made this rule to accommodate people, these other people, it's like when you could make a rule and say for women when they give birth, right, they should have 6 months, 9 months, after delivery and all that. And then the men are saying, well, what about us? I'm a new dad, I need to take care of my kid. So
Yes.
am I
Yeah.
not supposed to get the? And it's like I was like, well, I technically I'm like, okay, but I'm a single dad. I was like, so
Right.
at
Right.
that point in time, they feel excluded.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know what that's and so what you just said is so very interesting because good intentions, right? We want to
Yeah.
give the resources and the ability for people to be successful. We'll stick with the example of parenting, right? For the longest time, oh yeah, a woman has a child and she gets a certain amount of days off or time off, et cetera, and fathers would not.
Hey, quick break. Before we continue, I'd love for you to join the Wisdom Journey newsletter. Every week, I share exclusive insights, tools, and behind the scenes updates to help you stay ahead in your own journey of building an online business. It's simple, practical, and built to help you grow. Sign up today for free at the link in the description. Now, let's get back to the episode.
Well, think about what was missed in it, and a lot of companies have changed this, right? So now they
Yeah,
have paternal leave as well, instead of just maternity leave, right? And so think of what was missing, right? You people want to be successful at home and they want
yeah,
to be successful at work as well.
yeah,
Men were not able to be successful at home with the children, building relationships, helping to grow this beautiful young, individual into a productive part of society. And so that was the deficit there. And so therefore, guess what? They couldn't give their best at work.
yeah,
There was a part of them that they could not bring to work because they could not find that connectivity for success. So I think that's a great example of the realization, okay, there was a good intention to have maternity leave. Great
yeah.
intention.
Wow.
But we didn't give full consideration of who else needs that type of connectivity for that specific purpose of rearing a child.
Yeah,
And so that realization came much later on, right? And many organizations are now doing it, which is fantastic. But it took some time to understand that. And it probably took, I will say this, I don't know this as a fact, but it's just a feeling based off of what I've observed and what I've seen over the years. People were thinking it for many years before it actually happened, right? It took one person to just elevate the one person or a group of people to elevate the concern and recognize that we need to do something different. People have to speak up when we see something that's not working or that is exclusionary. We have to be good stewards and use our discretionary voices to speak up and say, hey, let's think about this differently. I see that there's something missing. How do we bring this forward in a way that allows us to think about who is really impacted? Who are all of the people who are impacted? And what can we do to help that? So, that's my thought there. But this is something I just speak about in my book, right? My book is titled Including You, Leading Inclusion from Where You Are. And it encourages people to raise the question of who's not included, who's not in the room, who's not being seen, so that we can recognize, okay, do we need to shift policies, change policies, practices, or procedures in a way to make sure that we are being fully inclusive and not just performatively inclusive, right? The opportunity to make sure that everyone is a part of the wonderful efforts that we put forward is something that we have to do with intentionality.
at first the idea I had of it was like, oh yeah, inclusion, great, awesome for the big companies, right? But now I realize that inclusion isn't necessarily restricted to the companies. Like if you've ever been a parent or tried to organize a birthday party for kids from your child's school, you realize that this one is like, oh, that's my friend is this one is allergic to strawberry. The other one is allergic to peanuts butter. This other person is allergic to milk, and this other person, and you're like, oh wow, I need to prepare a birthday party that it's fun for everyone. How do we do this?
Yes, absolutely. I love
Right.
what you said. It's not only for work. It's not in one place. I try to I've used this expression or explanation in the past. I love to garden. I
Okay.
love flowers. I love vegetables. I just love to play in the dirt, right? And so I always do, a big garden in the summer, both flowers and vegetables. Long story short, if you think about any flower garden, any garden, that's all about inclusion, right? And
Yeah.
so take it from the human perspective. It's all about inclusion. You have dirt, you have water, you have worms, you have, all this stuff that's needed in order to make sure that you have the ability to have your flowers bloom, your roses bloom, your rhododendrons, all of these things to make sure that they are successful. If you have a vegetable garden, certain vegetables require more water than others.
Yeah.
Certain vegetables require a certain pH level in the soil that's different from other vegetables. And so we have to make sure that we're tilling the soil in a way that everything, every vegetable in that garden can flourish,
Yeah.
can grow, and be productive. And when we do that, think about how abundant
Oh,
the garden is,
yeah.
right? What do you get from that? You get a plethora of all of the wonderful things that you planted throughout the season, right? That's inclusion right there. Making sure that everything that every vegetable plant that's a part of that garden has what it needs to succeed, right? And that you're giving attention in a way that everything can succeed in that environment.
Oh,
Yeah.
your book, I like the title of your book, Including You, right? You focus on leading inclusion from where you are. What inspired you to
Yes.
write it?
Oh gosh, I've been doing this work for a long time, and I've seen a lot of things,
Okay.
a lot of good, a lot of bad, a lot of in the middle as well. And I'm really passionate about it. I have a daughter who is my absolute world, love her dearly, and
Yeah.
she's preparing to get out into the world. She, finished college and she's out there now and is doing a great job. And my concern as a parent was how do I make sure that my daughter and her peers can be successful in the workplace and not be excluded for the way she shows up, for the way she presents, right?
Yeah.
How do I claim my stake in the world to try to do something that will make the future better? And so through the conversations that I had with CEOs, with, managers, there was workers, individuals who wanted to see something better for our world, people would say, because I do consulting, back up there. I also do consulting.
Yeah.
People would say, Delphia, when are we going to get a book from you? And I'm like, you don't want me to write a book. I've never written a book before. And I've received many requests. So that in alignment with, hey, trying to make the world better for my daughter and for all of the other children that are coming along. Um, that's what really prompted me to take some time, deviate from graduate school and take some time and go ahead and get these words on paper.
Oh, oh. Was there a moment where you realize people were waiting for the permission to lead differently?
Oh yeah, I see that all. Yes, I see that. I've seen it all throughout my career. I still see it today. I find that oftentimes because this is something that we're not 100% comfortable with. You have individuals who are waiting is in the workplace
Yeah.
who are waiting for human resources to say, "Okay, this is what you need to do."
Yeah.
Right? Or you have human resource waiting for the CEO to say, "Okay, this is what we want to do." Or you have the CEO waiting for the board of directors to say, "Okay, well, this is what I want you to go do."
Yeah.
And with inclusion, we don't need to wait. We don't need to wait. If we think about human centric integrity, right? We're all humans.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. We're humans in the workplace. And we, as individuals, as I said before, know what it feels like to be excluded. We know it. And it's uncomfortable. So if you think about that, anybody can lead inclusion just by not doing what made them feel excluded in the
Yeah.
past, right? It's very simple, but we're not comfortable with it because we think, oh, well, I don't have the degree that says
Yeah.
that I'm an inclusion expert, or I don't have, or it's about those people over there. It doesn't affect me. I'm not affected. Yeah, you are. If you're human, you're affected by inclusion in any, it can be at any time. And so this is about each and every one of us, right? Everyone and creating that reality that inclusion is something where anyone can lead from where they are. It's really I always say inclusion begins with I. If you think about the way that it's spelled out, the way that inclusion is spelled.
Yeah.
It begins with I, and it always needs you. Inclusion begins with I and always needs you. So if there's no I and there's no you, we don't have inclusion.
Yeah.
But if we are intentional about recognizing that we have the I ourselves, the I is us, right? It starts with us, no matter what. And then how do we work to engage you, the you?
Well, I want us to step back a bit. A lot of times when people hear inclusion, and for companies and for small businesses, sometimes it becomes a buzzword. How do leaders move from statements to real accountability and real system culture of inclusion rather than just we're trying to tick a box, we're trying to be inclusive.
Yeah, yeah. I love that question. There is performative inclusion, right? We're checking the box,
Yeah,
we're meeting the mandate, we are, doing the dance, right? All of those things. And it's not sustainable. It's not real. People see through that and we know that that doesn't last long term. How do you make it something that is sustainable, that is long-standing, that is not performative? The way to do that is to make sure that it's embedded. It's a stated expectation within the culture, as you mentioned before.
yeah.
It's an expectation within the culture, and that anything outside of that is not accepted.
Oh,
Sometimes you have to be very, you have to be, you have to give that tough love, right? Exclusionary behaviors are not accepted. Disrespect, incivility, um, you know, groups that are only for one person or one demographic.
yeah,
You can't tolerate that in the workplace because as soon as you tolerate it once, you set a precedence and it becomes a reality for going forward. So there has to be, first, I'll take a step back. There has to be a level of vulnerability to say that, oh, maybe we need to do things differently, that we're
yeah,
not perfect, that we need to operate a little, get away from performative measures and actions and then you can move forward and set standards and expectations. I'm not saying that you write a policy on inclusion. Please don't take that away.
yeah,
What I'm saying is that things that do not promote, encourage, or precipitate inclusion should not be tolerated. And once that becomes a reality, um, then it can be long-standing. I've been in HR for a long time. There's a number of policies and procedures that every HR department has. And if a policy or a procedure is not adhered to consistently, then people it's
yeah,
taken advantage.
yeah.
All right. So
Well,
we've got to just be intentional around that.
well, yeah, yeah, that makes sense. In your experience, what internal work must a leader do before they can create external inclusion?
Oh, they've got to look at themselves. So a leader or anyone, they have to get comfortable with being vulnerable. In my book, I talk about I start the book off with conversations or statements that executives have said, right?
Yeah,
And they're true statements. CEOs have said, you know what? Oh, I'm not comfortable with talking about it because I'm a white male, so it
yeah.
doesn't involve me. So I don't have the right to talk about it. What?
Wow.
Yes, you do, because you can be excluded too, right?
Yeah,
Right? You can feel those feelings of exclusion as well. So you're human. So again, getting back to human centric integrity, there's also, within the statements, it doesn't involve me because it's all about women. Well, no, that's not true either, right? So
yeah,
I think we have to be vulnerable to look at ourselves. So leaders and everyone else I'll say executives, CEOs, right,
yeah,
need to take a step, take a moment to appreciate vulnerability and the fact that no one has it figured out perfectly. But as a leader, their responsibility is to take the steps to better understand their role in it so that they can have a positive impact on it. So I think it's just allowing ourselves the grace and realization that we're not perfect. We're going to mess things up, right? I've been doing this work for 20 years, and there are sometimes I look at myself and say, Delphia, I know you didn't just do that. That's
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's it's recognizing that we're human, but being able to be comfortable with the fact that we are human and being able to be comfortable with the fact of challenging ourselves to do better.
Wow. And just a different uh, perspective to that question would be, was there a mindset shift you personally had to make as you evolved as the leader?
That I've had to make as a leader. Um, I think the mindset that I've had to make is really just twofold. It's twofold. Making sure that I allow myself the grace to be human, right? To mess up, right? So there's a lot of expectation for someone like me who's been doing this for a while to not mess up.
Yeah.
As I said, I mess up, right? I'm human. There are things that I say, oh, I could have done much better, or I
Yeah.
should have done it different.
Yeah.
And that's okay, right? Because when you know better, you can make a choice to do better,
Yeah.
right? Now, if I continue to go along my path, once I know something is that I could do something differently or better, and I choose to continue down that, horrible path of exclusion, then that's where the problem comes in. So I think that for me, that's the first thing is allowing myself that grace to recognize I'm going to mess up. I'm going to be human. I can't, once I'm not human, then once I'm absolutely perfect, then I probably won't be on this earth anymore. Right. So it's, yeah, I think that's kind of the very first, thing, and then allowing myself to be vulnerable to continue to learn and to continue to figure out how do I continue to build and see people for who they are,
Oh,
recognizing that I need other people. Yeah.
oh, thank you so much, Defia, for having this chat about inclusion with me. Where can listeners get a copy of the book and also learn more about the work you do and connect with you?
Yes, absolutely. You can get my book and on Amazon, right? You'll find it. It's titled Including You, Leading Inclusion from Where You Are by me, Delphia L. House. Howze is how it's spelled. You can also go to my website, Howze Solutions, and you can see all of the things that I'm doing. You can sign up for a blog and stay connected. You can purchase the book there as well. You can also go to Barnes and Noble and all of the other book outlets. But it's really, I encourage people to connect with me because, first of all, I love to connect with
Yeah.
individuals. I'll share information with you. You can find me on LinkedIn as well,
Yeah.
right? Delphia House, you'll find me there as well. I post information there as well. So those are three different areas that you can find it. And I will challenge anyone who purchases the book to reach out to me directly and I'll give you a shout out and
Oh,
make sure that we create that connectivity because it's really about getting people to understand that inclusion is about all of us.
yeah. Well, thank you so much. I'll put the links mentioned in the description so that listeners can click and go directly to the site. Thank you so much, Defia. It's been
Great.
such a lovely conversation.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation and I'm grateful for having the opportunity to be here.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning into Wisdom Journey. I hope today's episode gave you practical steps and fresh ideas to keep moving forward. If you found value, be sure to subscribe and share this podcast with a fellow creator or entrepreneur who'd love to learn too. And don't forget to sign up for the newsletter and the link in the description for more resources, experiments, and lessons straight to your inbox. Until next time, keep building, keep learning, and keep walking your own wisdom journey. Yeah.